Every Christmas, my grandmother tries to turn my children against me. She doesn't raise her voice. She doesn't shout or insult me directly. She does something much worse. She smiles. And then she plants stories in my children's heads when she thinks I'm not listening. This year, though, something changed. Before I tell you what happened, I need to say this. And if you've ever lived through something similar, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Because for a long time, I thought I was the only one dealing with this kind of quiet cruelty. My name is Lauren Brooks, and for years, Christmas has been the hardest day of my life. Not because of gifts, not because of money, but because every December, my own family turns into a battlefield where I'm the enemy, and my children are the prize. It always starts the same way. The house smells like cinnamon and pine. Christmas music plays softly in the background. My kids run ahead of me into my grandmother's living room, excited, trusting, happy, and she's already waiting. Perfect hair, perfect sweater, perfect cookies laid out on a porcelain plate she only uses for holidays. From the outside, she looks like the picture of warmth. But I know better. Because while everyone else is laughing in the kitchen, she pulls my kids close and whispers things she knows will stick. Does your mom still work all the time? Do you ever wish you stayed here instead? I just worry about you. Your mother makes life so hard. Little comments, soft enough to deny, sharp enough to cut. By the end of the night, my children would look at me differently, quieter, confused, carrying questions they were too young to fully understand. And my grandmother would sit back, satisfied, like she'd won something. This had been happening for years. Ever since my divorce. Ever since I stopped doing exactly what she wanted. When I married young, she loved me. When I followed her advice, she praised me. When I became a mother, she acted proud. But the moment I chose a life she couldn't control, a career she didn't approve of, a marriage she later blamed me for ending, her love turned conditional, and my children became her leverage. At first, I told myself I was imagining it. She means well. She's old-fashioned. She's just worried. That's what my family said. That's what my father said, looking anywhere but at me. That's what my mother said, trying to keep the peace. That's what everyone says when it's easier to excuse harm than confront it. But I wasn't imagining it. I saw the way my son would hesitate before hugging me after Christmas dinner. The way my daughter would ask questions that didn't sound like hers. Why do you always have to work, Mom? Grandma says families should stay together. Grandma says you chose this life. She never told them outright that I was a bad mother. She didn't have to. She framed it as concern, as love, as worry. And every year, I swallowed my anger for the sake of my kids. Until last Christmas. Last Christmas, something happened that made me stop pretending. It was snowing lightly when we arrived. My kids were bundled up, laughing, dragging me toward the door. Inside, everything looked perfect. Too perfect. The tree was bigger than usual. More gifts underneath. My grandmother had gone all out, not for generosity, but for performance. She hugged my children tightly, longer than necessary, then glanced at me with that familiar look, the one that said, "Watch carefully. I'm about to remind you who really matters." Dinner was loud. Relatives talking over each other, wine flowing, old stories being retold. And then, right when dessert was served, she did it. She clinked her fork against her glass. "I just want to say something," she announced, smiling sweetly. The room quieted. She turned to my children. "I'm so grateful I get to be here for you," she said. "Because children need stability. They need roots. They need people who put family first." Her eyes flicked toward me, just for a second. "I only hope," she continued, "that one day you understand how much I tried to protect you." My daughter looked at me, not accusing, not angry, just confused, and that look broke something in me, because in that moment, I realized something important. This wasn't about misunderstanding. This wasn't about age. This wasn't about concern. This was about control. And she was using my children as weapons. I smiled through the rest of the night. I helped clean up. I thanked everyone politely. But inside, a decision had already been made. Because what my grandmother didn't know, what she never bothered to know, was that my children weren't as unaware as she thought. They were listening. They were watching. And this time, they had heard enough. That night, after we got home, I tucked my kids into bed like I always did. I expected the usual post-holiday exhaustion, the sugar crash, the overstimulation, the sleepy smiles. Instead, my son hesitated before lying down. "Mom?" he asked quietly. "Yes, sweetheart." He stared at the ceiling for a moment, choosing his words in the careful way children do when they sense danger. "Why does Grandma think you don't like family?" My chest tightened. I sat on the edge of his bed, brushing his hair back gently. "What made you think that?" He shrugged. "She says you chose work over us. That you don't want us to grow up around people who love us." Before I could answer, my daughter spoke up from the other bed. "She said she worries we'll end up lonely," she added. "Like you." That word hit harder than I expected. Lonely. I realized then how long my grandmother had been building this narrative, not all at once, but slowly, carefully, over years. I didn't explode. I didn't defend myself with anger. Instead, I took a deep breath. And for the first time, I didn't dismiss their questions. I answered them. I told them the truth. Not the bitter version, not the resentful one, but the honest one. "I work because I love you," I said, "because taking care of you means making choices that aren't always easy, and because being close to family doesn't mean letting someone hurt you." They listened, really listened, and then my daughter asked the question that changed everything. "Why does Grandma always talk about you when you're not in the room?" Silence filled the space between us. I realized then that my children weren't confused anymore. They were connecting dots. And that terrified me, not because they were learning the truth, but because I had waited so long to trust them with it. I kissed them goodnight, promising we'd talk more. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay awake replaying years of Christmases, birthdays, Sunday dinners, the subtle digs. The comments framed as concern, the way she always positioned herself as the protector, and me as the problem. I thought about how often I had stayed silent to keep the peace, and I finally asked myself a question I should have asked years ago. Whose peace was I protecting? The answer was uncomfortable. Not mine. Not my children's. Hers. And I was done paying that price. 2 days later, my grandmother called. Her voice was light, cheerful, as if nothing had happened. "I was thinking," she said, "maybe the kids could stay with me for a few days during winter break. They need stability, routine." There it was. I felt the familiar pull, the urge to explain, to soften my tone, to avoid conflict. Instead, I did something new. "No," I said. There was a pause, a sharp one. "I'm sorry," she replied, sweetness curdling at the edges. "They won't be staying over," I repeated calmly. "Not right now." Her voice tightened. "You're overreacting. I was only trying to help." "I know," I said. "And that's the problem." Another silence. This one heavier. "You're letting your resentment cloud your judgment," she said finally. "Children shouldn't be exposed to adult conflicts." I almost laughed, because for years she had exposed them to hers. "I'm protecting my kids," I said, "and myself." Her tone shifted then, from disappointment to accusation. "So this is punishment?" she asked. "After everything I've done for you?" "No," I replied. "This is a boundary." She scoffed. "You've always been dramatic." That word again. The one she used any time I stopped complying. I didn't argue. I simply said, "We'll see you at family gatherings, but conversations about me with my children stop now." And then I hung up. My hands shook after, not from fear, but from adrenaline. Because standing up to her felt like breaking a rule I'd been taught my entire life. The fallout was immediate. My mother called next, her voice tired. "Why are you upsetting your grandmother?" she asked. It's Christmas. Can't you just let things go? Let what go? I asked gently. Her undermining me? Her turning my kids against me? She doesn't mean it like that, my mother said automatically. I know, I replied. She means it exactly how it feels. That ended the conversation. Over the next few days, something unexpected happened. My children started talking, not just asking questions, sharing observations. She always waits until you leave the room, my daughter said one evening. She tells the same stories every year, my son added, like she wants us to remember them. They weren't angry. They were thoughtful. And that broke my heart in a different way. Because it meant they had been carrying confusion quietly, just like I had for years. Christmas came again. This time we stayed home. No big gathering, no porcelain plates, no performances. We baked cookies, watched movies, built traditions that didn't involve walking on eggshells. My phone buzzed with messages from family members. Your grandmother is hurt. She doesn't understand why you're doing this. She just loves the kids. I didn't respond. Because love that manipulates isn't love. It's control dressed up as concern. And for the first time, I chose not to participate. That night, as my kids slept, my daughter whispered from her doorway, Mom? Yes. I like Christmas better like this. I smiled in the dark. So did I. And my grandmother? She didn't stop trying. But this time, she wasn't talking to children who believed everything she said. She was talking to children who trusted their mother. And that made all the difference. A confrontation was inevitable. I knew at the moment my phone lit up with my grandmother's name 3 days after Christmas. This time, she didn't pretend everything was fine. I need to see you, she said. No greeting, no softness. Alone. I looked at my children playing on the living room floor, laughing over something small and unimportant. The sound grounded me. If you have something to say, I replied calmly, you can say it with other people around. Another pause. You've poisoned them against me, she said, her voice low. I can hear it. That accusation, the irony of it, almost took my breath away. I haven't said anything about you that isn't true, I answered. And I haven't said anything at all unless they asked. She scoffed. Children don't ask those questions on their own. Yes, I said quietly. They do. When something feels wrong. Silence stretched between us, thick and uncomfortable. Bring them to my house, she finally said. I want to clear the air. No, I repeated. The word came easier this time. Her voice sharpened. You don't get to decide that. I do, I said. I'm their mother. That's when the mask dropped. You've always been ungrateful, she snapped. After everything I sacrificed for you. There it was. Not love, not concern, ownership. I didn't ask you to sacrifice, I replied. And you don't get to cash that in on my children. She hung up on me. And within hours, the family pressure started. My aunt texted first, then a cousin, then my father. She's devastated. She doesn't understand why you're being so cruel. You're tearing the family apart. I read every message slowly, and for the first time, I noticed something. Not one of them asked how my children felt. Not one of them asked why I was setting boundaries. They only cared that the system had been disrupted, that Christmas no longer looked the way they expected. I didn't respond. A week later, my grandmother showed up at my door unannounced. I opened it before she could knock again. She stood there rigid, coat buttoned to her chin, eyes sharp with indignation. I won't be shut out of my grandchildren's lives, she said immediately. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. They're not props, I said evenly, and they're not bargaining chips. You're dramatic, she shot back. You always were. I smiled slightly. Maybe, I said. Or maybe I just stopped accepting behavior I used to excuse. Her face twisted. You think you're better than me now? She asked. With your little boundaries and therapy words? No, I replied. I think I'm healthier. That's when she said the thing she couldn't take back. If you were a better daughter, she snapped, I wouldn't have had to step in and protect them. Something in me went cold. You weren't protecting them, I said quietly. You were protecting your influence. She laughed bitterly. They love me. Yes, I agreed. Because they're kind. But they also trust me. And that's something you didn't count on. Her eyes flicked toward the window. You've turned them against me, she accused again. No, I said. I stopped lying for you. She stared at me, chest rising and falling, as if waiting for me to back down. I didn't. Finally, she straightened her coat. This isn't over, she said. I know, I replied, but it's different now. She left without another word. That night, I sat with my children on the couch. My daughter leaned into me, resting her head on my shoulder. Is Grandma mad at you? She asked softly. Yes, I said honestly. Did you do something bad? My son asked. I took a breath. No, I said. I did something necessary. They were quiet for a moment. Then my daughter nodded. Okay, she said simply. That was it. No drama, no confusion, no guilt, just trust. In the weeks that followed, my grandmother's tactics shifted. She stopped whispering. She started performing, public displays of sadness, stories about how she'd been cut off, comments at family gatherings about how she didn't know why children were being kept from her. I didn't engage, and slowly, something else happened. People started noticing patterns. She does that a lot, someone whispered at a birthday party when she made another passive comment. I never realized how controlling she was, my aunt admitted one evening. I didn't point it out. I didn't need to. When you stop participating in manipulation, it becomes visible to everyone else. My children grew calmer, more confident. They stopped asking questions that didn't belong to them. And one afternoon, my son said something that made me realize just how different things were now. Mom, he said, when someone says bad things about you, I don't believe them. I swallowed hard. Why? I asked. Because you don't do that to us, he replied. You talk to us, not about people, to people. I hugged him tighter than I meant to. That was the moment I knew. Whatever came next, anger, distance, accusations, I could handle it. Because my children were no longer standing between me and my family. They were standing with me. The final shift didn't come with a scream. It came quietly, the way real power always does. It happened in early February, during my cousin's birthday dinner, the first large family gathering since Christmas. I almost didn't go. But then I realized something important. Avoiding spaces to keep the peace is still letting someone else control the room. So I went. My children stayed home with a sitter. This wasn't their battle. It never was. When I arrived, my grandmother was already there, seated at the center of the table like a queen holding court. Her voice carried, sharp and practiced. Oh, it's good to see everyone together again, she said loudly. Family is everything. Some people forget that. A few heads turned toward me. I smiled politely and took my seat. For the first half hour, she behaved, compliments, stories, laughter that sounded just a little too rehearsed. Then the moment came. I still don't understand, she said, swirling her wine, how someone could keep children from their own grandmother, especially after everything I've done. The table went quiet. I felt the familiar tightening in my chest, the old instinct to smooth things over, to absorb the discomfort so everyone else could relax. But that version of me didn't exist anymore. I set my fork down gently. I'm not keeping anyone from you, I said calmly. I'm protecting my children from manipulation. Her eyes snapped to mine. How dare you, she said. You're turning everyone against me. No, I replied. I stopped lying for you. My aunt shifted uncomfortably. Someone cleared their throat. You always twist things, my grandmother snapped. You've always been difficult. I nodded slowly. Maybe, I said. Or maybe I just stopped confusing control with love. Her face flushed. I raised this family, she said. Without me, none of you would be here. And without boundaries, I answered, none of us would be okay. That's when it happened. She laughed, sharp, bitter. You think you're so superior now, she sneered, with your rules and your therapy language. I leaned back slightly. No, I said. I think I'm done being afraid of you. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was heavy. Real. Finally, my father spoke. Mom, he said quietly, she's not wrong. My grandmother turned toward him, stunned. You too, she demanded. He sighed. You've done this for years, he said. With guilt, with stories, with pressure. We just never stopped you. Her mouth opened, then closed. She looked around the table, waiting for someone to rescue her. No one did. That was the moment her power evaporated. Not because she was confronted, but because she was no longer believed. She stood abruptly, chair scraping against the floor. I won't sit here and be disrespected, she said. I met her gaze. You're not being disrespected, I replied. You're being seen. She left without saying goodbye. The rest of the dinner passed quietly. No one followed her. On the drive home, something inside me finally settled. Not victory. Relief. A week later, she sent a letter. Not a text, not a call. A letter. It was 3 pages long. Half apology. Half justification. She wrote about loneliness, about fear, about losing control as she aged, about not knowing how to let go without feeling erased. I read it once, then I folded it and placed it in a drawer. I didn't respond. Not because she didn't deserve compassion, but because compassion doesn't require self-sacrifice. I didn't cut her off completely. I didn't explode the family. I did something quieter. I changed the rules. She sees my children now, supervised, respectful, with boundaries clearly stated. No whispers, no secrets, no undermining. And the moment she crosses a line, the visit ends. No arguments, no explanations, just consequences. And something unexpected happened. She adjusted. Not perfectly, not gracefully, but enough. Because when manipulation stops working, people either change or lose access. Today, my children laugh freely. They trust me. They don't feel responsible for adult emotions. And every Christmas now, we make our own traditions. No guilt, no performances, just warmth, just truth. People talk a lot about revenge, about winning, about making others pay. But the most powerful thing I ever did wasn't punishment. It was protection. I didn't turn my children against my grandmother. I turned the lights on. And once they were on, she couldn't hide anymore, and I didn't have to shrink again. If you've ever been told you were too sensitive for protecting your kids, if you've ever been guilted into silence to keep someone else comfortable, if you've ever felt like love came with conditions, you're not alone. And choosing peace doesn't make you cruel. It makes you free.